Hey, what's going on, everybody?
What's happening, fam?
Welcome back. This is episode 6.
Episode 6.
We are 2 away.
That's right.
We're going to talk about what those 2 episodes are going to look like at the end of this episode.
Correct.
Episode 5, we talked about the difference between talking with someone and talking at someone.
Yes.
These episodes, to me, I think in this season of my life are crucial because I think as I'm growing as a student, and I think as I'm growing as a husband and a father, I also want to make sure I'm growing as a leader. And I think there's moments where sometimes you feel like you hit the mark and sometimes you feel like you miss it.
Right.
And, you know, for pastors, the average day every senior pastor wants to quit is
Monday.
And I think the average day every youth pastor wants to quit is Thursday because it's the day after youth group.
Right,
and so there's just moments and times where I get done preaching or communicating, whether it be Sunday with our young adults or Wednesday with our youth, I get in the car and sometimes I just kind of have this moment where, man, did I do good enough? Did I hit everything? Did I say something stupid, which I'm pretty sure I'm always saying something stupid?
Right.
Did I communicate this? Like, what could we have done better? There's so many things leading up to the service, and then there's just tons of things that are happening mentally after the service.
Right.
Right. You got this from Craig Rochelle.
Correct.
And I wanted to hit on this because you said a couple things about, excellence. You said a couple things about, maybe trying to hit, that marker, right?
Right.
But this is G.E.T.M.O, good enough to move on.
Yes.
Good enough to move on. There are 24 hours in a day.
Yes. And everybody gets the same 24 hours.
And believe it or not, it's up to me if I want to get 8 hours of sleep.
Mm-hmm.
It's up to me whether I want to get home at a decent hour.
Right.
If there's traffic, it's not my fault. It's because I just didn't plan accordingly.
Or there's just traffic.
It's right. Seattle, it's raining, and people drive 10 below. I take back roads. I just don't even try to consider.
Exactly.
I avoid it. Can you set the? I'm setting this up, but now I'm going to pass this to you.
Okay.
Talk to us a little bit about G.E.T.M.O, good enough to move on, where you're at,
right.
where you were with it, how you are with it now, all those things.
Yeah. So in ministry, so I grew up in the era where, we had to give God our best, right? Everything is about excellence. So much so in Bible school. And I'm not knocking the Bible school or this experience, great experience, right? In Bible school, both Pastor Jennifer and I were on the worship team together. I think I'm playing music. That's wrong. That's weird. Accidentally touched the phone.
Yeah.
We're on the worship team together.
Yeah.
And we had this conference coming up called the Summit.
Yeah.
Right. And we were asked as the worship team to practice standing up from our chair in unison.
Yeah.
Walking onto the stage in unison.
Wow.
And then grabbing our instruments and or our microphones in unison with this big old fat smile on our face.
Yeah.
Okay. I can do that. I can stand up with the team and I can walk onto the stage and I can smile or grab my microphone and smile. Right?
Yeah.
We practiced that for over an hour because the director of the president at the time, actually still the president and the founder, was not happy enough. It wasn't excellent enough for us. Like, we might have stood at a different pace.
Wow.
We might have walked onto the stage at a different pace.
Okay.
There was something that he didn't like, and so we had to have it perfect. We had to have it perfect. We had to have it excellent.
Yeah.
We're doing this with excellence.
Right.
And I was like, it needs to be good enough to move on because I can't smile no more.
Wow.
Like, my cheeks was hurting.
Is that what you were thinking?
Yes. Because we would get up there and then we didn't practice not one lick of music. It literally was, can you stand up right, walk on the stage right, grab your microphone right, and be perfect.
So so do you think it was trying to pay attention to those details? Like because sometimes the little things make the big things.
Well, here was the difference. The difference was all of that practice went in.
Yeah. And
we still messed it up during Summit. Somebody still got to an instrument late, according to him later on.
Wow.
So ever since then, this concept of excellence has been like, can we get it to a place where we are satisfied and it's good enough to move on? When do we actually say this is good enough for both us and the kingdom? And when can we When can we begin to be effective for the kingdom and stop having to be perfect at everything?
Do you think at some point though that comes to? Do you think at some point that comes to like, okay, I've practiced, I've studied, now I'm going to allow the Holy Spirit, and I'm not trying to use that as a crutch for not planning or producing or making things excellent, because I think if you are in church, not even just in church, but I think you want to be excellent, and I think you want to have excellence. And I think when Sunday morning rolls around, 9 a.m. and you're going live on Facebook, YouTube, whatever, you do want to make sure that everything's going well. But then there are moments that when the worship team hits the track, if there's like a malfunction that happens, that's out of our control, right? Like, you're not sitting here thinking that, oh man, I'm going to hit this track and I'm going to mess it up on purpose. I don't think that's anybody's mindset. Okay, within the 24 hours of the day, we all have the same 24 hours. How can we, as people in the church, because like you hear athletes all the time, people don't, how is it said? It's going to bother me. It's like you would hear Kobe Bryant say, like, I don't practice until I get it right. I practice until it's, oh man, I got to find
something
that.
Like second nature or something
second nature or something like that. But
well, I mean, so they're in, as a musician, right? Practice makes perfect is no longer a phrase. Perfect practice makes perfect is now the phrase. In other words, if you practice it wrong, then you're going to get it perfectly wrong every time.
That's true.
Okay, but if you practice it perfectly, then you'll eventually get it. And the problem with this concept is very much this: we're human. Yeah, we're not going to get everything right 100% of the time, all the time. Right. And I feel, Pastor West feels, that we oftentimes hinder both the spirit or the growth of the kingdom or the growth of a leader or the impact of a team when we're so focused on getting everything perfect or excellent. Yeah. And we don't say, you know what, this is good, because what do they say the enemy of best is, right? Good is the enemy of best, or best is the enemy of good. I think perfect is the, I can't. It's right here. Good to great. Jim Collins, I've read it. I just don't remember the phrase right now. Okay. So anyway,
shout out Jim Collins.
But the enemy of your best is good enough. But the reality is sometimes good enough is right where you need to be, because if I'm leading a team and I'm trying to get it excellent, I might be throwing somebody off. I might be offending somebody. Now, am I worried about offending somebody? Not all the time.
Right, but you're not intentionally
trying to do it. But I'm not
going
to intentionally do it.
Okay.
And so if I'm walking in going, it has to be perfect, it has to be this, it has to be that, then you're probably not going to be as effective. It's just like and you know this too. You get it so great in rehearsal for worship on a Sunday morning. Yes. And everybody's like fired up and you're good. And then you get to that first song and somebody switched your papers.
I don't know what happens between, and this has happened to me. I don't know what happens. Seriously. I don't know what happens between sound check at 7:30. Right. To then 9 a.m. now you're on. Right. And then if you've got two services, for some reason, the second service is the one where you probably get it right. But, okay, let's talk about music, because as a drummer, I am very, adamant about playing the right song to the point where if it's not right, then I am going to be on myself. Right. And then if I overthink it, then I'm going to mess up. Mm-hmm. So the way I would listen to songs, like if somebody were to send me a set list right now, I'm being honest with you. If somebody said, hey, Isaiah, I need you to play these songs in 2 weeks, here's the set list. Yeah. Do you know what I'm listening to for the next 2 weeks?
Those songs.
And do you know what order I'm listening it to?
Hopefully in the order you're going to play them.
Yeah. Because you know why? Because I want to make sure my energy level matches the intensity for each song. Correct. So that helps me. Right? So if for 2 weeks, and I've done this before for Easter, we've had a set list.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And I'm not even joking, for a month straight, I didn't listen to anything else but those 6 songs. Mm-hmm. And what was crazy is 5 were on the set. 1 was a special. Okay. And I listened to those songs backwards and forwards. Matter of fact, if you put me on drums and you played a track to those songs, I'm pretty sure I could play that thing start to finish with no breaks in between. There you go. Because in my mind, I had an internal thing, like, I'm not going to mess this up because I want to make sure I play it well. Right. I think that we should always, let me say this. I think we should always strive for excellence.
Correct.
I think that anything you do unto the Lord, you should do it with excellence, right? So that means like making sure I even heard Pastor Jack say this when we were getting ready for Easter. Hey, let's get the grass cut again. Well, we just got the grass cut last week. He was like, yeah, well, grass grows. Right. And I want to make sure when people step up and when people are walking, I want to make sure the bark is good. I want to make sure the sidewalks are clean. I want to make sure the grass and the hedges are trimmed. Well, why is that? Well, because we know when people show up, because believe it or not, Easter is like the Super Bowl to any church.
Right. It's the Super Bowl to church.
We want to make sure that we put our best foot forward. Now, here is what I want to suggest. I have to look at myself and I have to look at my schedule, and I call my schedule at work, I call it a hit list. Right. I have to say if that hit list has 10 or 12 things on it, it's not for me to get it done within the day. That might irritate somebody out there. Wow, you only got like 3 or 4 things out of 12. Well, you know what? I'm going to show up tomorrow. And guess what? I'm going to work on this. Right. And then guess what I'm going to do the next day? I'm going to work on that. I might be irritating somebody's Enneagram number by perfection, by like not getting this done. Yeah. But I'm saying that I've come to a space.
The Enneagram.
The Enneagram. Well, I mean, that's what, well, sometimes, though, and I've heard it said like this, and I love this. I think sometimes we use the Enneagram number as a crutch to not resolve the issue that we really need to work on.
That's true.
Like I'm not saying that like I'm not going to get things done, but is it good enough? Like, can I honestly say I did everything I needed to do? Right. Can I say that I put in the study? I put in the practice. Right. Some people are just overachievers. Yes. Like I've heard it said. Now I want to ask you this.
Okay, go ahead.
Because I got one intern and she's amazing. She's killing it. She was telling me how she's like, I got a B. And she said high school Bree would have been so upset. I just said her name. Sorry. But oh well. Bree, love you. Shout out to Bree. She said high school Bree would have gotten upset. Right. But I'm just thankful that I'm still able to write a college essay, even though I've been out, and that's good enough for me.
There you go. That's G.E.T.M.O.
Now, can I ask you something?
Okay.
Do you feel like G.E.T.M.O can be an excuse for procrastination?
Absolutely. Because especially for something that you don't typically or particularly want to do. Okay. Right. So the whole eat the frog concept, right? You guys know what eat the frog is, right? Yeah. If you have a list of things to do and eat a frog is on the list, you get the hardest thing done first.
That's right. So I hate purchase orders.
I know exactly.
I hate those things. I've said it before. I'm going to keep saying it. I hate those things.
So then G.E.T.M.O. Yeah. For a purchase order, would be, did you actually fill out half of it today? Like, do you know all the details? Yeah. Is there a deadline?
Like Monday, I do those.
Okay. And so for me, like, I have to have my messages done by Thursday now. Okay. And so, and I've been in this routine of I get to come back next week. So this message here is good enough for me to move to the next week.
Oh, wow.
Right?
Like it's good enough right now to preach to get you through, but then to come back to pick up.
It's good enough right now for me to actually get the point across, to get the scripture out, to preach the word of God. It's not every detail of everything that I wanted to say, because I'm also trying to shorten my long-windedness, I guess is the best word for it. Yeah. I'm trying to cut it back a little bit. And so a lot more things end up on the cutting floor, and I start to look at it and I go, that's still a good message. That is good enough to deliver and still be impactful and still be productive. Yeah. And then move on, because there's other things now that I get to do. There's other things now that I need to do. And here's one of the things too. So many people get stuck in, instead of procrastination, you get stuck in the need to perfect this thing. Everything else falls away. Everything else falls by the wayside.
I have to perform at this level.
Exactly. And if I don't, reality is the human brain can really only hyper focus on one thing at a time. Yep. Right.
I know I can.
The whole multitasking thing, in my opinion, I've done research on it, and I don't think it's a thing. I think that you cannot do simultaneously two things diversely at the same time. No. I think that you can break off a little bit here and there and then come back to what you were doing. Agreed. And that's what we call multitasking. But there are a lot of folks out there who, even in their quest to be perfect at a bunch of things, right, they multitask everything. So what you're really doing, though, is you are breaking apart all of your percentages. I'm going to give 10% to this, 20% to that, and 8% to this, 15, 45% to that.
Yeah.
And then nothing gets a good percentage. And then you're disappointed in yourself because it wasn't perfect, or it wasn't excellent, or it wasn't this or that. So then at what point in time in our brain and in our processes do we say, you know what, this piece is good enough to move on? Now, here's where you don't good enough to move on.
Okay.
If you're an engineer, an architect, or an electrician, or a carpenter, or like all of the trades that are out there, good enough will kill people. So I'm not talking about that.
No, I hope no.
I'm talking about in leadership, in ministry.
Yeah.
Do it with excellence, which is a heart and a spirit and a desire.
Yep.
But don't get stuck.
Yeah.
In it has to be perfect, because then other things begin to.
Let me throw this out there too.
Fall by the wayside.
I think there has to come a point too, right? I think there has to come a point where you know the playbook enough, right? And so I'm thinking about football, right? There are people who need to go to the OTAs.
Right.
And you need to show up for training camp.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you want to get those reps early.
Right.
You don't want to be week 15 or week 12 just now finding your rhythm, and you guys are hoping another team loses so you can get to the playoffs. Like,
Shout out Seahawks.
You know, okay. We did all right. Gino was okay.
Gino
not a fan, but I mean,
Gino rocked it.
Yeah,
so it's fine.
He should have wrote back.
Nice.
But here's what I'm saying. There has to be something inside of us that falls in love with the process of getting things, or we have to fall in love with the preparation during the process.
There you go.
So if I'm falling in love with the preparation, like you do an event, and let's say it's an annual event that you want to have, your first one, I would just say count that as a win that you did it.
Yes. That is called good enough to move on to the next thing.
Do your first event. If it's your first one that you ever did and you had 75 people show up, count that as, because we did that.
Count it as a win.
We did that. The next one we had 125 people show up.
There you go.
We have not had one since. Why? Because I have felt God stop me.
There you go.
And check my motive, see what's going on. There are things, and honestly, I don't have the capacity and the time space right now to do that.
Okay.
And I am okay with it. But does that mean it's done? Not at all.
Right.
Does that mean it will resurface again? I pray it does. Mm-hmm. Here's the other thing. Culture right now really wants us to hustle. And hustle. Get this. What is it? Measure twice, cut once?
Oh, yeah.
How about you read twice, act once?
There you go.
Just a thought process.
Because the opposite of that is I cut it twice and it's still too short.
But at what point? But I'm just thinking, right? Because you're asking at what point,
right?
Do you know it's? I would just say, because I mentioned that we're going to do brag tables. Okay, right. I'm saying this. You just have to start doing something and counting that as a win, good enough to move on. Because now that we've done summer camp, right. And now that we've got a real one underneath our belt, I know exactly what to do this year. Right. Like this year, I'm probably going to preach more, probably 2 times. The other youth pastor is probably going to preach more. We're not going to do morning sessions. We're going to do group sessions in your cabin that allows more for intimacy.
There you go.
Kids want connection.
Right.
Kids want authenticity. I think what's more authentic than being in that cabin, having a real conversation about the Bible study that because if we have a theme, you're going to go with it. So I think sometimes we don't feel like it's good enough to move on because it doesn't look like the other churches.
Ooh, that's good. That's good. So bringing it back then to just ministry stuff, right? Just leadership stuff. So, and this is where I definitely give this back to Craig Rochelle. You know, so as a pastor, you prepare for your messages.
Yeah.
Right. How many hours do you prepare for one message?
Who, me?
Yeah, you.
I think it's daily.
Yeah, but how many? Like, put a number on it. How many average hours do you get to give to a message for prep?
I don't know. I know that sounds bad.
I give between 10 and 15.
Okay.
I used to give about 25. And I left so much on the cutting floor.
Even at the 25 mark?
Even at the 25 mark. I left so much at the cutting floor. Do I use this Greek word? How deep do I go? How many different cross-references? This could lead to this rabbit trail, or this could lead to that topic, or blah, blah, blah. So I'm putting in 20 to 25 hours for 45 minutes. Is what I used to do. Now I do about 10 to 15 hours of just deep study. I do another about 5 hours of just prayer and re-preaching it.
Yeah.
Right?
See,
that's why it's out there.
That's why it's hard for me to put a time limit on it, and I probably need to track it. But the reason why I have a hard time tracking it is because while I'm in the car, I'm thinking about it.
So how many hours are in a week? Right? Think about that for just a second.
Yeah.
And you get to speak to them for about 25 to 35 minutes.
Once a week.
Once a week.
I might be in that 10-hour frame. And I'm saying that with an estimate because, like I said, like I'll start thinking about the sermon
right.
soon as I'm done preaching.
Right.
Amen.
Mm-hmm.
After I get done with my leaders meeting, I'm in the car. Okay.
Mm-hmm. What did I do right? What went wrong? I could have said this different. I said, man, that really hit. Or today was,
like I told you, we're going through the book of Galatians.
Yes.
For 6 weeks.
And
your response was,
you could do it for 6 months
because there's so much into it. So
exactly.
Let's get out of the pattern of trying to rush through everything. Like the Bible has so much into it.
Right.
Like I literally feel like between Pastor Wes and myself, if we felt that leading, we could probably preach Galatians 1:6 for 30 to 45 minutes.
Yes.
That
just
one
Galatians
verse.
1:6. Yeah.
Because the question is so big. Why are you turning away from the truth? And I know I mentioned that on another episode, but I'm bringing that back reference because he's addressing an issue that I believe is relevant to today.
Exactly.
So when do I know it's good enough to move on? That's another question. When do you know, Pastor Wes? I did everything I needed to do. I spoke everything I needed to speak.
Right.
Sometimes, right, and I love what's going on now. Sometimes I'll go back and reiterate, hey, let's go back here.
Right.
Like there's nothing wrong with doing that. I think there used to be this time frame of like, you can't repeat a sermon.
Right.
If you repeat a sermon.
At least for like 2 years, you can't repeat a sermon for 2 to 5 years.
Why? Who made that rule? I think that's like an invisible barrier.
I mean, Paul wrote 2 letters. One because they didn't get it the first time, and the second one because, you didn't get it the first time, so let me say this again. I mean, I wish I had the direction and the gall and the gumption to be able to do that sometimes because we prepare this whole thing, right? We've got our 4 points in a prayer or whatever.
Yeah.
And we get into the message, and then by the time Monday morning hits, let's just be honest, by the time, dinner hits on Sunday,
right,
most of the people don't even remember what it is that the pastor preached.
No.
And so I'm not saying don't give it the time. I'm not saying don't pray about it. I'm not saying don't prepare for it. I'm just saying know that there is a moment and there is a point where it just needs to be good enough to get that point across or get that, scripture out or.
And I want to hit this too, and I know we got to close here. And I want to say this because we've been doing groups every other week with our youth ministry. And one of the things that really led me to do that was because instead of waiting for summer camp, I wanted to create a point of contact with my leaders and the students well in advance.
There you go.
Because sometimes you get to summer camp and you're only there for 3 or 4 days. By day 3, you really get that relationship going, and then you got to go home.
You got to leave, yeah.
So what we decided to do is we completely flipped our youth service upside down, and we went with I preach one week, we do groups the next week.
Gotcha.
One of my leaders said, Isaiah, this is probably the best thing for us.
Right.
I really feel like if you stop now, we're going to miss the engagement.
Right.
Because here's the other thing. My leaders have jobs. They work. They have families. Yep. So then the traditional way of youth ministry was preach, preach, preach. Now you have a group. Now you need to plan something with your group outside of here once a week, once a month or something like that. I came in like that and it was working.
Right.
COVID hit. Things completely changed.
Don't work no more.
So now I'm doing, and I think you need to try some things. The other reason why I'm saying that is because when we got to summer camp this last year, there was such a tightness within our leaders and our kids that you could tell they knew who Jesse was. Yeah. They knew who Matt was. They knew who Christina was. They knew who Heather was. And because they knew who these people were, it wasn't because they're just at our church, but now when we're getting into, hey, have you guys ever felt like you dealt with unforgiveness, or do you feel like some of your friends are turning away from the truth, or what is this? Now they're like, yeah, actually I have. So when my leader came to me and said, Isaiah, if you stop now, we're gonna miss it.
Right.
So this is a leader. Once again, we talked about the problem in
The power and the problem should.
Yeah. So when he brought this to me, he's somebody who I trust because he's faithful. He's also on staff, but he's faithful. He shows up. He's there. So do you think I'm going to lean in to hear what he's saying?
Absolutely.
And what has happened since then? I had one girl come up to me and she was like, "Are we having groups today?" I'm like, "Yeah." I was like, "Do you like groups?" "I love it. Like, I love my group. I love that, every week or every other week I get a chance to talk."
But excellence would say, go back to the way it was before. Excellence would say, do you have everything for everybody at all times, right? And sometimes you can't guide a conversation in, like, you can't plan for this conversation to be guided that way.
No.
And so are your notes then for the small groups, or your notes for groups, are they good enough?
Yeah, I think about that.
So
I think about that.
Like Sunday mornings here at Hope Church, we actually are doing this thing where I put out questions. Here's my scriptures I'm using today.
Yeah.
Here are the questions that I would like for you to answer.
Yeah.
If you don't want to answer them, that's fine. But this is here, boom. 1 week I only had 2 questions, and it was good enough.
And can I say something?
It was good enough to move on.
And I know, and this is what I'm loving about where these conversations are going in this season, because sometimes I'll give one question.
Right.
And my leaders are good enough. Trust your team.
Yeah.
Trust your team that they're going to help carry the vision out with you.
Right.
But I trust my team to take that one question, and then they're so good. They're so talented. I just love my team. I hype my team up all the time. I brag about them. Here's why I do that. They're going to be able to reach that conversation a lot better than I can.
Right.
And they're better to do it than me.
Yeah.
And can I be honest with you? Can I talk to you, church leader, senior pastor, youth pastor? Can I encourage you with something? You don't always have to be the one to have that conversation.
Yep.
And I tell my team all the time, I don't want to know the conversation. If they're not dying, if they're not cutting themselves, if something is not life or death, Isaiah doesn't want to know. Right. I have enough things on my mind. I have enough things going through my mind that I don't want to know. And when I hear those conversations, I'll ask briefly, "Hey, how were conversations?" "Oh my gosh, it was so good."
Right.
They'd be like, "Yo, this is what we was talking about." I'm like, "For real? That came from this person?"
Right.
And they're like, so they are getting it. They are hearing it.
Nice.
Okay, you got to wrap us up, man, because we could probably
good.
sit for another 30 minutes.
We could, man. We could just go with this
because it's that good.
So, hey, thank you guys for being with us. Next 2 episodes, we're actually going to do something a little bit different. We want to create this brag table.
Yeah.
And the brag table will be either with guests and or as a part of our buymeacoffee.com. But we want to hear your successes. We want to hear your wins. So for the next couple of weeks, we're going to actually have some guests here, and we're going to create a brag table.
I'm excited.
We want to create what are the wins in your ministry? What's going on? What have you prayed for, and where did God answer prayer? What are you still praying for? What are the things that you're seeing happening in your life or in your ministry that are actually going well? Because I mean, let's be honest. For a couple of years, everything just kind of felt short.
It did.
But also in ministry, and I think this is kind of the cap of it all, if we brag about things, oftentimes it may sound a little arrogant or a little prideful.
Right.
My church versus your church.
Yeah,
versus,
but that's not.
But we're not trying to do that.
That is not the heart here.
We really just want to say, like, what are the wins in ministry right now?
Right.
What's going on in your life?
That's good.
Where did God show up? And brag on God a little bit, brag on your team, brag on yourself.
Yeah.
Shoot, you're leading this. Get out there. So for the next couple of weeks, episode 7 and episode 8. Episode 7 is going to be Brag Table 1.
Yep.
Episode 8 will be Brag Table 2. We'll have some guests with us.
Yes.
I think it's going to be a good time, man.
I mean, if you're in school and you're killing it, let us know. Let's celebrate that.
Absolutely.
I think we have to start celebrating wins.
Yeah.
And stop harping on the losses.
Yeah.
So we love you so much here. We don't know everything, but we're willing to walk with you through anything, and we will see you at the brag table next week.